Hi, welcome to Arabella number 1. I hope you have seen the introduction video, and I hope you've at least taken a look at our pre-Arabella tutorials. So that'll give you an idea of some of the more precise cutting and measuring and trimming for this project. So we're just going to jump right into the block, okay? They're starting us off nice and easy. It is a single block this month. This is the center block of the quilt. So we are going to start with a square and a square. This is a 3 1/8 by 3 1/8 inch square. I'm going to mark two sides there. I'm going to fold my triangle in half, and when I do this, I'm going to lay this right in that crease that I made, open it up and lay it flat before sewing a proper 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm going to fold it in half, lay it flat, that fold right in the crease, and open it up. That way I know it's centered, and I'm going to sew. Now, once here, we're going to press these open. These outer triangles are larger than they need to be. So when we're putting on the second sides, when we fold to mark our crease here, this is the point that you're looking at. In a perfect world, this would line up, but really, this is what we want, the halfway point from here to here. And this is what we want, the halfway point from here to here. Okay? And those are the creases that we are going to lay our 3rd and 4th triangles on. Lay in here, line it up, sew, fold, lay here, line up, and sew. Again, proper 1/4 inch seam, because when we are here and these are pressed out, you want a little bit of a bite here that we're going to use our 8-inch square and a square tool. Love this tool. This is the 4 1/2 inch square, which is what we're squaring to. And when we lay this on here, I'm going to make sure that the horizontal and verticals, those points on the 1/4 inch lie exactly on those points of the inner square before I square. So I'm looking here, 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 and here. And those T's should be exactly on the points. If they are not, this is a point where you can take apart some of the triangles, take a little bit of a bigger seam allowance or take a little bit of a smaller seam allowance to make sure that this falls in that 4 1/2 by 4 1/2 before trimming. Okay. So you're going to trim two sides, turn it around, drop this into that white 4 1/2 inch by 4 1/2 inch line. I love this ruler because it makes the squaring for the 4 1/2 by 4 1/2 so easy. You have those 2 points there. I can see them, which means I'm going to have a proper 1/4 inch seam allowance on the outside of that point so that I don't lose that point when I sew my block together. Okay, this one's been pressed out. So that's our first component, the square and a square. Our second component, fun. They're half square triangles using fabric number 2 and fabric number 5. These are cut 5 1/4 inch. You are going to mark your center, sew a seam on either side, and then you're going to cut it in half. Now, there's a couple of ways to do the squaring for this. These are going to be squared to 4 1/2 inches by 4 1/2 inches. Oh my gosh, there's the 4 1/2 by 4 1/2. I can take this, put that mark the diagonal right on my seam line, cut 2 sides, and there's my 4.5 by 4.5 when I press it out. Okay? If you're not really comfortable with that, that's perfectly fine. You can press and still use that 4.5 by 4.5. You're going to drop that line right on that diagonal seam and trim and trim. I love this ruler. This is one of my favorite rulers because I am not looking for a center. I am not distracted by any other measurement marks. It's just my fabric and the horizontal and vertical lines and my seam allowance. So you are going to be making 4 of these for the outside corners. Okay. Now the joy. This is our new exciting piece. Okay. This is using the 2 peaks in 1 6-inch triangle ruler, or if you have a Tri-Rex ruler or the Goddess tool, some other tool besides this one, because there are a lot of tools out there that do this, you are making a triangle in a square. Now the instructions for fabric 1 and fabric 10 have you cut a 4.5 inch by 21 inch strip. Please read the instructions for your tool first. Some of the tools will have you cut a 4.5 inch strip for the center triangle and a 4 3/4 inch for the side triangles, but please read your instructions first before making that cut for the 4.5 and 4.5. Okay, this ruler calls for a 4.5 by 4.5. And if you didn't know, this little QR code can be scanned by your phone and all the instructions for this ruler will pop up automatically. Okay, that's one of the great things about the Creative Grids. All their rulers have a little QR code for instructions on how to use them. Okay, so on our 4.5 by 4.5, okay, that's what this calls for. I am going to take my 4.5 inch strip, lay that down on the bottom, okay, and I'm going to cut, and I'm going to turn around and cut. So one of the things that I've discovered as I have been cutting my pieces is, as I cut, one would now assume that I could just lay this on here on the 4.5 and a 4.5, and this would be the perfect angle, and this would be straight on the line. In a perfect world, yes, but as I continue to cut, I'm not always getting that. So give yourself a little room, straighten off on this edge, and straighten off on that edge. Okay, you'll be using fabric 1 for the centers, and you will be using fabric number 10 for all of the sides. So this is again a 4.5 by 4.5 strip. I am going to be using this ruler, and I'm always doing this. Like, how did I make that work? Okay. So I am going to use this ruler this way. Genius, Smiley. Okay, by lining that up with the 4.5 inch, making sure, see, this is kind of one of those places that more than the big one, the small one. I've been cutting off of this, and one would think that when I line this up on the bottom and I line this up here, you can see that this is slightly off, okay? And maybe it's not a big deal, but you can just shift this down just a hair and straighten up both sides. Straighten up both sides and make sure, if you're using this ruler, that you take the little tip on the top, because that's going to be what we use to landmark when we put our triangle in a square together. Okay, so once we are cut, we have our centerpiece. You're going to lay, I should do this one here. I always lay them out so I know where the top is, because when you fold this over to sew, you get this wonky little piece coming off, and you want to absolutely be above the tip of the top of the strip. So you're really lining up with this bottom corner. You're going to take a 1/4 inch seam, and then you're going to press it out. Okay. Then you're going to come on the other side, lay it out, flip it over, line that up on the bottom. Make sure that tip meets at the top, so it almost covers the tip on the bottom. Make a good 1/4 inch seam and press it out. Now, if you have sewn these nicely, you should be able to drop this into your 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch square, and you can line it up with the white lines. Now you see I'm a little above here, I'm a little short here. Now this is less than a 32nd of an inch, so I'm not going to worry about it, but because my tip is here and I have a good 1/4 inch seam allowance, I am flush on the bottom, I can just take this and trim that off straight, again using that 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch reference. See, that's what I'm off. Okay, I already trimmed this one. Let me look at another one that I haven't trimmed yet. Okay, so I will tell you that as I was sewing these, I sewed one, and I was noticing that when I dropped them in here, I was ending a little short on this side, and I don't know if it was my cutting or my seaming, but what I ended up doing is starting at the good 1/4 inch here and just ending a little scant on the top, so this would slide out a little. Okay? You can make little minute adjustments on this. This is fine. I know it's not exactly matched, but I have a good 1/4 inch allowance, and if somebody's going to tell me, oh my gosh, that's not perfectly centered, they are not my friend. Okay. So you are going to have 4 triangle in a squares. You're going to have 4 half square triangles, and you have your center. So we're putting this together like a 9 patch. These are going to come to the sides. These are going to be in the top and the bottom. Are we still good? With the dark corners on the outside. Now, how do we get these to match up nicely? You want this point and this point to meet. So I will often take a pin, and when I put these right sides together, you can see where the seam meets. I will drop the pin in there. Oops. And I will drop the pin in here. I will push them together so that they're flush. And I'm going to sew on that seam. Okay. Now you can see that you get to wiggle a little bit. When that matches up, you have less than a 32nd of an inch on that side. Don't worry about that. I will either pin on either side, or I will use a clip here. And when I start sewing, I will sew from here to the center, take my clip out and go through. Or some people will drop their needle into that center, sew to one side and sew to the other side. And when that happens, your points will match up. Okay? When you're sewing your top and the bottom, you want to match your point up and do a little bit of easing to make sure these seams match up. But this is your first block for Arabella. I would love to see some pictures. You can go ahead and drop pictures into the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. But woohoo! Here we go, month 1. Yay! See you next month.